Whose slides are these?
They were Ellen Davidson slides.
Oh, great.
Oh, they're fantastic.
Great shots.
I mean, horrible fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Ellen is a very good photographer.
I'll say. Oh my God.
Those are settlers, right?
Yes. Charming.
Mm.
Oh, where'd that come from? That's me.
Yay, right.
Oh, did Jammu send you all that?
No, I found it on the web.
Oh, that's now that one's
That's you.
old. That's me at an anti-Walmart protest in DC.
Looks like Ray McGovern.
It is.
Did sure did.
Yes. There we are. There's Ellen. There's Anne.
That's Kingston, right?
That's Kingston. Our little city. That's right.
Felice, was that you?
No.
Yes, it
Oh, I don't know,
was.
maybe.
I recognize the hair.
Great.
Yeah.
Baraka.
Who's that statue?
There's Anne. I don't know who he is, Phil.
I'm pretty sure it's Governor Clinton.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Zoe.
There's actually a movement to, a petition to remove that statue. Mm.
Wow, those are beautiful
Classic.
placards.
In Kingston. Aren't they beautiful?
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Back to Palestine again.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Hello, Eldad.
Hello, hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Jamu, my fearless leader.
Yeah, no, you my leader. I see my other leader here, the tyrant.
Hello, Jamu.
How you doing? Good to see you.
Likewise.
You had a very interesting year, huh?
Yes, it did. The last year.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. Guys are wearing a tie. Sad.
Oh,
Yeah, that's right, Tyrant. That was last year. It seems like, I guess because we've been locked down for, at least I've been locked down for a year.
Yeah, right. Well, lots happened this year also.
Yeah. I know one thing, the time is shooting by.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, we all feel that.
You think it's because we old or what? Or-
No, I think it's
We're not
actually
old. Come
happening.
on.
I think time is speeding up because it keep getting more intense.
Bring back memories.
If someone has some background noise going, they should mute themselves. Sorry.
We still hear it.
We're gonna take people in after we start. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
5 minutes.
Ellen says she thinks we should start. It's 5 after.
Okay, I will start right now.
Is everybody let in?
We're going to be letting people in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to all the people who came on time. And we're going to be enjoying, and thank you very much, Ellen Davidson, for these slides, these incredible photographs that you have of our speakers and the struggles that they're associated with, the demonstrations in against settlers, the demonstrations in Kingston, New York, and demonstrations that Asantwa has been part of. My name is Marjorie Leopold, and I want to welcome all of you on behalf of the co-sponsors of this event, Jewish Voice in the Hudson Valley, Mecker Middle East Crisis Response, Women in Black in New Paltz, Veterans for Peace, and the U.S. Boat to Gaza. So those are our co-sponsors tonight. and we want to thank them. And we have, as you know, three incredibly impressive speakers. First, we're going to hear from Ann Ames. Ann is an activist and a resident of Kingston, New York. She's one of the co-founders of a regular walk, which is called the Wednesday Walk for Black Lives. These are rallies in Kingston, New York. They started when Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and they've continued. And she has been the MC, and she's a very powerful leader, actually. And she's also a member of End the New Jim Crow Action Network, dedicated to fight the racist criminal justice system here in Kingston and the Hudson Valley. We also are very happy to welcome Asantwa Nkrumah Toure. She's a longtime radical feminist, a revolutionary Pan-Africanist, and church sister who worked with solidarity campaigns such as Al-Auda, the Right of Return, and the African Anti-Zionist Front in solidarity with the people of Palestine. She's also very active in the Black Alliance for Peace, and the Green Party of Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia Tenants Union. And I've been doing some housing work, and the Philadelphia Tenants Union just got 50 vacant houses from a long-term struggle, which is incredible. Anyway, and we also have Phil Weiss here, and Phil is the founder and co-editor of Mondo Weiss, an independent website devoted to informing readers about developments in Palestine and Israel and related to US foreign policy. He is also co-author of 2 books, and he writes for the New York Times Magazine, Harper's, Esquire, The Nation, and Common Dreams. So we have a pretty wonderful lineup of speakers who are going to take a look at the struggle, the anti-racist struggle, the struggle against white supremacy, the struggle for criminal justice, the struggle for equity, equality, and justice everywhere, and especially our focus tonight, the United States and Israel, Palestine. So we're going to start with Ann Ames. Thank you very much. Looking forward to, and you can ask questions in the chat. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you that. So as questions come up, please put them in the chat, and we'll have a robust question and answer after our speakers. The speakers will go in this order: first Ann, then Asantwa, then Phil, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers for the 3 panelists. Thank you.
So I'm on now?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ann Ames, and I want to thank Marjorie for inviting me. And I would like to say hello to Santra and Phil Weiss. As a matter of fact, I'm very interested in hearing Santra's talk on the poor people's thing that I read real quick about, because I'm interested in that also. Let's see, where could I start at? Around about the spring last year, I was not feeling too good emotionally, mentally, and I knew I had to get out of my own way. And the way that I know how to do that is what they call clean house and help others. So it's actually clean house literally and figuratively. So that's what I started to do. And after you get into all of that muck and mire in your own self, then it's time to get out and help others, because you don't want to stay there. And so I started looking for places to volunteer. And I found Brother Odell online with the A.J. William Myers African Roots Library. And I volunteered there, working on circulation and shelving books. And that's also where I joined Engine in the new Jim Crow Action Network. And I started also working with Citizen Action on their education committee. And in doing that, I met Fanone Frazier, and he was the lead activist of, lead organizer at Citizen Action. And one day he sent an email about, let's get together for a march about Ahmaud Arbery. So it was a handful of us that went to the park. What is it called? Academy Green in Kingston. And we decided that we weren't going to march that day, but we brainstormed what we wanted to do. So one of the things that came up was, well, Ahmaud Arbery is 959 miles away from Kingston. So let's just keep walking until we get to 959 miles. So we had planned another walk in 2 weeks. In the interval, George Floyd was murdered. So that galvanized us back to reconsider what we were going to do. But we had a very huge outpouring of people that day. It was over 3,000 people from all over. But that day, well, after that, we decided that we would do this until policies have changed, laws have changed, the way policing is in our city and in the country has changed. So we decided we would keep doing this every 2 weeks. And that's exactly what we did. We would meet, it would take us about a week or so to plan. And at that time, it was Fanone Frazier, Lisa Roya from, she was from Rise Up Kingston. Lisa Roya was a founding member of Rise Up Kingston. Rashida Tyler, who is a tireless activist in Kingston, and she was from the Real Kingston Tenants Union. And Daniela Funky Medina, she was or still is an economics professor at Amherst. And we had Amanda Seisenstein from Food Not Bombs. So every 2 weeks, we would get together and plan these marches, rallies at Academy Green Park. But we started changing up a little bit. We started focusing on defunding the police and all that entailed. Getting police out of the schools, divesting the money and investing in mental health, jobs, health issues, and let's see. Yeah, so we started with the defunding the police, and also we started to have more speakers for information on what is going on. Having Shannon Wong from the ACLU explaining exactly what is it called? Executive Order 203, which was the big thing that Cuomo decided that each county should do with their police in their community, what that actually meant, winning over 50A, and what else was there? I think that was it. So we started having our speakers that could give us and the people who come to the marches information and education on how we can go about doing what we need to do to slowly dismantle the policing in Kingston and in the country. And also we started around about October, we started focusing on gentrification. In Kingston, like Kingston now has become the darling of New York City. We've been getting a huge influx of people from the city with big money to spend on housing and rent. Housing has doubled and sometimes tripled in Kingston because of the median income has increased also. Stuff is going up. And so the police work hand in hand with gentrification. Gentrification is a process that needs the police to start harassing people and forcing them to move out of the neighborhoods, either by pushing them out, by locking them up. As a matter of fact, let's roll back a little bit. There was 2 reasons why the police started this siege in Kingston. Supposedly there was a rash in crime, this big crime wave they said was going on. And so the police just came down in Midtown, Kingston, and they were patrolling up and down. The mayor said that the crime wave was so high that he also enlisted the help of the state troopers and the county sheriff. So there were 3 different cops rolling around Kingston and essentially doing stop and frisk, which is illegal. So they would stop people and they wouldn't give them a ticket, but they would detain them for a half hour, 45 minutes, everybody out the car, searching everybody. And this went on for about a couple of weeks until the people decided to organize a cop watch. And this cop watch drove the police out of Midtown. They are no longer in Midtown. The sheriffs did not like to be filmed because that's what the cop watches did. I did a couple of them. If anybody saw someone getting stopped, you just take out your camera, you don't say anything to the cop, you stand reasonably distance back and just record the whole thing. And that went on for about 2 months. And then they were out of, so now they're gone. But that was all a part of the gentrification also. Also a part of the gentrification is moving services out of the community. The mental health part, the mental health part of the hospital that had 60-something beds moved completely out. At first, they said they were moving out because of COVID. At the beginning of COVID, they said they were moving the beds out so they were not accepting any more mental health patients because they were preparing for this big COVID thing. And then what they ended up doing was moving the whole operation to Poughkeepsie. So right now, Kingston does not have any mental health facility. If someone is having a breakdown or their meds are off and they need to be straightened out, they have to go to Westchester, which is approximately almost like 100 miles away, because there's no mental health facility here. And that's a part of the gentrification, because if you move the services out, then the people are going to follow the services. They're not going to stay here because there's nothing here to help them. And so that's a biggie for us right now, is the gentrification. There are about 35 vacant properties that the city owns that we are targeting, along with, I say we, I should actually explain that Wednesday Walk for Black Lives is a coalition of the different grassroots organizations that I mentioned: Rise Up Kingston, not Rise Up Kingston, Real Kingston Tenants Union, Food Not Bombs, Citizen Action, Engine, and Elisa's, I forgot which Elisa's thing was. It was for her daughter, Justice for Elisa. And so when the marches and the rallies are more like graffiti, we are coming out and we're letting everybody know what's going on. This is what's going on. This is, so all the different parts of the coalition, we come together, and when one person, one agency has an issue that they think should be proclaimed, that's what we work on. Or, so that's how it goes. And that's how we want to be, and we want to expand throughout the Hudson Valley. We are trying to, because we realize that we share politicians in different counties. We share politicians and stuff, and so we're trying to become bigger, so we could act more and have a little bit more power, perhaps. So we have came from just, I shouldn't say just, but marching and rallying to letter writing. So now we're doing more political stuff, letter writing, and working with other organizations and trying to stop what's going on now in Kingston. This gentrification thing is really serious. Everyone, I mean, you look around and the whole city is changing slowly, slowly, slowly. And well, let me go back a little bit. So the police are out of Midtown, but that's not the end of it. We know that's not the end of it. We have been in touch with Congressman Delgado's office, and we're going to meet with them because we have Wednesday Walk for Black Lives have what's called the 9 Demandments. And in the 9 Demandments, how am I on time?
One more minute.
Hello?
One more minute. Hold on.
Oh my, I didn't think I didn't even want to go that far.
That's okay, Ann. Just one more
Okay.
and you're good.
All right. So we have 9 demandments, and one of the demandment, a few of the demandments are to where is it here? Publicly discuss the police unions. Let me see. Drop charges from the Stop and Frisk campaign. So that's something that we're working on now. And thanks a lot. I'm sorry I did so much rambling. I was really nervous, and thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ann. Yeah. I'm going to reintroduce Santwa. Nkrumah Toure, for those of you who came late. And Asantwa is going to tell us about the struggles that she's been engaged with nationally and locally in Philadelphia. So thank you very much, Asantwa. You're there, you're on. You're muted, Asantwa. Okay, Asantwa is muted.
Mute. Okay.
There you go.
Let's go to from the beginning. All right. Okay. All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Asantwa Nkrumah. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I want to thank Fred and Jewish Workers for Peace and all the other sponsoring organizations for inviting us to this event. We're very happy to be here. And thanks to you for the work you're doing. Phil, thanks to you for the work that you're doing. I'm very familiar with your publication. I haven't read it in a while, but it's great to be on this panel with you. So thank you all for the invitation. Can you all hear me and see me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my little arrows aren't there. Okay, there we go. So this is, you know who this is. This is George Floyd. And it's very inspirational to me because this is taken in Ramallah in Palestine. And as many of you know, there were protests in solidarity with George Floyd around the world. But this one, this particular photo really caught my eye. All right. So we at Black Alliance for Peace, we take issues of policing, police brutality, militarism, and just for the Palestinian people as being very interconnected. And we also like to focus on political education and organizing, because that helps us to be well informed and it helps to guide our work. So, regarding policing, this first slide here, and I'm sure many of you probably know some of these things, but policing in the United States is derived from the slave catchers or patty rollers from the days of chattel slavery. They would go out and recapture us and bring us back to the slave master. And they also served in the role of monitoring and policing our movements in terms of where we live, what kind of jobs we had. And this is also where anti-loitering laws come from as well. Okay. I live here in Philadelphia. I've been here now 5 years. And a lot of my comrades here have told me that the relationship between the police and the Black community is very old, bloody, and racist. And to that effect, the Philadelphia Inquirer just last month did a very interesting article on that history, and it goes back to over 100 years. So one of the things I thought that was very notable is that in October of 1871, there was the shooting death of voting rights activist Octavius Cato. Also, the Fraternal Order of Police began in 1915 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and became a much larger national organization in a mere 3 years. Okay. So, and Philadelphia police even bragged about what they call their tear gas squad, which began in the 1920s. All right. Moving forward to the turbulent times of the 1960s and 70s, at this time we saw the beginning use of SWAT teams, the National Guard being called out, etc. One incident that many of you, I don't know, I don't want to date anybody, but this is a picture of the Ohio National Guard firing on the students at Kent State University. This happened May 4th, 1970, where 4 students were killed. 11 days later, Black students at Jackson State University were having a series of protests, and these 2 students were shot and killed by city and state police, again on May 15th, 1970. Moving forward again, we're looking at here the police and military gear in Ferguson, Missouri, April of 2015, during the protests against the killing of Michael Brown. And they had quite a bit of artillery and all kind of other technology that they used. Arrow. Okay. Also, there are several videos that show how the Portland police handled themselves and were cooperating with federal officers during the protest this summer, which they wound up contradicting city officials. Somebody would say, oh no, they're not working together. There are no federal agents here, but it turns out that they were. And several videos from citizens, independent journalists, and even mainstream journalists prove that fact. So this militarization of the police does not assure public safety. If anything, it makes it more dangerous. It makes it more dangerous for Black folks, for queer folks, homeless folks, and even for our movement as well, particularly when they bring out all this kind of artillery during protests. Okay. So in terms of this militarization of the police, we at Black Alliance for Peace, we urge you to make note of some of these programs that are going on now. One of them is called Operation Relentless Pursuit. It's a program that was started last year, meant to combat violent crime in several US cities. It offers more money and resources to encourage closer collaboration among federal agencies, local police, district attorneys, sheriffs, etc. Funding was also provided to hire approximately 400 additional police officers. But we must ask ourselves, who is this really for when the research shows that violent crimes in some of these cities had even decreased, right? So is this directed toward our movement, or is it somehow they're trying to assert their control over people as we witness the crisis of capitalism? Because we know what capitalist system, it needs the police, it needs its military to maintain and ensure control. So we, a Black Alliance for Peace, we call for community control of the police. And by that we mean that community control of the police is a principle of self-determination. We must organize ourselves to shift power into our hands so that the material conditions of our communities will improve for the better. Imagine, if you will, political power in our hands to determine police department budgets, methods of policing, accountability for police misconduct, etc. It also means we must organize ourselves to demand, we must demand all the resources necessary for healthy communities, such as access to healthcare, affordable, safe housing, quality public schools, mental health and substance abuse treatment programs, job training for living wage jobs with benefits, etc. This is what healthy communities look like, and this is what we mean by defunding and abolishing the police altogether. Community control of the police. Okay, also another program is the 1033 program, where the Department of Defense has given approximately $5 billion of surplus military equipment to over 8,000 police departments across the United States, sometimes at no cost to those departments. Skip ahead here. Just this slide here, I wanted to show folks again that the solidarity with the police killing of George Floyd was around the world, several countries in Africa and Europe. Also, the picture here at the top, it's in the West Bank city of Ramallah. And at the bottom, this is Sydney, Australia. And some of you may know, in the Aboriginal people of Australia and the Maori people of New Zealand face similar struggles with the police there as well. Again, regarding militarization of police, the military, etc., we have our campaign against AFRICOM. Black Alliance for Peace currently has the US Out of Africa Shut Down AFRICOM campaign. Now, AFRICOM started under former President George Bush, but it expanded under the first Black president, Barack Obama. So we definitely disagree with this further militarization of Africa. And we find that the United States has some sort of military presence in 53 of Africa's 54 countries, Yet the United States is not officially at war with any country in Africa. We surmise that the US evolved this way to have access and control over Africa's resources and to counter the presence and influence of China. So we say we must everyone in our movement, we must say no to all forms of militarism, no to police and military recruitment at our schools, places of worship, recreation centers, civic associations, unemployment offices. If you go to an unemployment office, you often see these signs about joining the military or joining the National Guard, these kind of things. We say no to that. Also, they put up flyers around teen mentoring programs, jail or police release programs, etc. We also say no collaboration with weapons makers and nonprofit organizations, charities, school or after school programs, STEM learning programs that are targeting girls or students of color. One example is Raytheon and Girl Scout cookies. Do some research on Raytheon and Girl Scout cookies. You may want to find a different kind of cookie, right? So also organize our community to say yes to other vital programs that we all know we need: affordable housing, job training, etc. Skip here. Now, in researching for this presentation, I found a lot of great books and articles, videos, etc. So later, I hope that Fred can send everyone out this document that I also sent, a list of possible readings. Very, very helpful, very current. But these three books here really stuck out in my mind. I haven't read these books yet, but I have skimmed through them in a local bookstore. But I would invite you all to perhaps start a study group on some of these books, or maybe even invite the authors to a future Zoom event. I think it would be very helpful. Okay, just want to show regarding solidarity with the people of Palestine. This is Ethel Miner, who I had the pleasure of meeting in 2010 at the 50th anniversary of SNCC conference held at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's standing there in the middle of my big brother, Kwame Ture, and the first president of independent Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah. She is that important link between SNCC and the Palestinian struggle and its position against Zionism. She wrote a series of articles for the SNCC newsletter, and as some of you know, after that there was a lot of controversy, but they were definitely on point. Again, my big brother Kwame Ture. Huey Newton, then a member of the Black Panther Party, meeting with PLO chairman Yasser Arafat in the 1970s. Razmia Ode and our very own Angela Davis. Unfortunately, Razmia was deported from the country, I think 2 or 3 years ago after a campaign of several years. Okay, this is something that Malcolm X is not very well known for, an essay he wrote called Zionist Logic. It was printed in the September 17th, 1964 edition of the Egyptian Gazette while he was in the country at the invitation of Gabriel Nasser. And I hope you all get a chance to read it later. It's very fascinating how far ahead he was at that time. Now, this picture is one that I really like because I know several of the young people in this picture. It's members of Dream Defenders, Black Lives Matter, Black Youth Project, activists from Ferguson, etc., who were in Palestine in July of 2016. And also, this is a picture from an edition of the Electronic Intifada, August of 2016. Perhaps some of you here in this meeting have been to Palestine as well. And I definitely like the pictures that someone showed earlier. But right now, we see how a lot of these things are connected in ways that we probably did not imagine. There's a program called CVE, Combating Violent Extremism, where the police and or other law enforcement agencies spy on the Arab community, the Muslim community, invited out to the mosque to give so-called quote unquote informative presentations, etc. But for me, the CVE is nothing but a program to not only spy on people, but also to create and nurture snitches, so that you will report back to these law enforcement agencies about activities and activism going on in the mosque or in the Muslim community, the Arab community, etc. And CVE also reminds me a lot of what we know now about COINTELPRO, where police send in informants and what have you into our social justice movements. There were informants in SNCC, there were informants in the Black Panther Party, there were informants in the American Indian Movement, there were informants in the Nation of Islam, Students for a Democratic Society, and a whole host of other organizations. And we know the aftermath of what happened with COINTELPRO. Matter of fact, I was reminded that today is the anniversary of the Chicago police murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, December 4th, 1969, right? So that, I just say all that to, really show how that some of these things continue, but they have different names. They manifest themselves in different ways, but the spying on our movement, the disruption of our movement continues. So in closing, I just want to say that our struggle continues. Our solidarity among all of our movements must continue. We must have the kind of political education that helps to cement those relationships and that we strengthen those relationships. We need to look at, and I want to give a shout out to our comrades from Jewish Voices for Peace, starting the program Deadly Exchange, where US police departments are trained in Israel. This includes several cities here in the United States, such as Philadelphia, New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and others. As a matter of fact, in doing research for this, I found out that the police department of Louisville, Kentucky, in 2011, some of their officers went to Israel for this training. And that was at the time when their police chief was a Black man named Robert White. So we know from that, it doesn't matter the race of your police chief or your mayor, etc. These are their politics, and this is what we're up against. So I want to close now, looking forward to any questions you may have. And thank you all again for your attention, and thanks to all of you, our comrades, for this invitation. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Asantwa. That was wonderful.
Did I get on time?
You did. You were right, spot on.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and we will have questions too for you and Anne. That was, I think Asantwa's talk, as well as Anne's talk, kind of set you up, Phil, to, bring it home to the struggle in Palestine and the similarities that you might observe in the two struggles. So Philip Weiss, it's a pleasure to introduce you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Marjorie. Thanks, Anne, and thanks, Asantwa, for the excellent setup and discussions that have preceded mine. First, just because there's so many activists here, and I want to just alert people that on Monday night, there's going to be a vigil outside the governor's mansion in Albany, led by Release Aging People in Prison and several other prisoner solidarity organizations, because this is a governor who has done zero on clemency. And at a time of COVID, especially, it's just crushing to think that this guy has been distinguished himself in some ways as a leader on COVID and is absolutely backward on this question. And so that's at 5:30 on Monday. So you prepare yourself for a certain audience, and I didn't realize quite how sophisticated this audience would be about these issues. I think a lot of people on this call have been to Palestine. And so I'm going to whip through my remarks and leave time for questions. And I'm going to try to highlight parallels to things that Anne and Asantwa have already said. I don't think it's necessary for me to go into great detail about who the settlers are. in Palestine, who these Israeli settlers are. I think because you all know that pretty much the outlines of it, it's been going on since 1967 across the Green Line. It's been going on since the 1880s in other parts of Palestine. Obviously, Zionism has a long pedigree in that area. But there are now 650,000 of them in across the Green Line, Jewish, almost all Jewish settlers, and it's illegal, although the United States doesn't recognize it as being illegal, and that's part of the political context for this process. And it's the things that are very familiar to, should be familiar from the talks we've already had, is that this is obviously based on an ideology of supremacy. And I didn't know about the Malcolm X brochure from so long ago. But it's Zionist logic, and Zionist logic is that Jews have a higher right to the land based on the Bible and other, great documents of history, and that on that basis, it's all right to ethnically cleanse Palestinians, to cause genocide against Palestinians, to deny them rights, and to establish an apartheid order in the West Bank. So I just want to speak a little personally about this, because whenever I started going over there in 2006 to see what was going on, and I was always like, wow, I got to see these settlers. What is that? And it's so scary and frightening. I got to see what that is. And ultimately, I spent a lot of time in the settlements, sort of undercover. As a journalist, they would have thrown me out if they'd known I was a journalist, or a writer. And one of the things that was kind of shocking was just how normal these people were. And I just wasn't prepared for that. And now it's very clear. Anyone with any kind of theoretical understanding understands, of course, they're normal people. This is what societies, what sort of settler colonial orders do. They create this sort of two-tiered or three-tiered system. And these people have a very strong ideology, but it's not the zealots that I was expecting to find. Yeah, there's some zealots. There are a lot of people who thump a Bible, but they're mostly sort of ordinary people who have come to accept a Zionist ideology that makes them better than the people they're around, and that justifies gentrification, to reflect what Anne was saying, and other forms of oppression of the indigenous population. And I guess one of the things that I find kind of very analogous to the United States, and another sort of surprise to me as someone who wasn't well grounded in this kind of theory, was the degree to which this ideology becomes embattled and then becomes militarized, and then sort of continues to double down and double down and double down, and to justify itself and raise the stakes. And that's what we're seeing with Zionist settlement of the West Bank and other parts of Palestine. Is, first of all, let me be clear, this is a process that has been happening in Palestine since the onset of Zionism, and with Jewish refugees sometimes and settlers coming from Europe. This is not the occasion to discuss, where should the Jews have gone who were refugees. Clearly, a lot of societies should have welcomed them. The issue is not whether they should have been able to find a safe place, but whether they should have established an order that makes them on top, which is what happened. But what I find kind of sort of shocking and deeply disturbing is the degree to which this ideology, which is supporting an illegal and an immoral enterprise, as it becomes embattled, has to sort of build up its moral, its own mythology and its own narrative about why it's so necessary. So you get this sort of BS about, the Jewish right to the land, and it's rooted in the Bible, and it's all this mythology and horse manure, but that is essentially Jewish supremacy. And in that context, also, it has a white supremacist element to it as well. And then on top of that, you get the military, where it's necessary to enforce this with a lot of arms. And in the Ann Davidson photographs, we saw the ways in which settlers themselves become armed. And so this is not, power comes out of the barrel of a gun, and it's coming out of the barrel of a gun there. The Palestinians have no arms virtually, and you have all these Jews who are just armed to the teeth. It's very disturbing to see, but of course there are echoes in the United States again. And then the other thing that happens in this connection is that the United States has become deeply implicated in this process. And we can reflect on the ways in which the American story involving ethnic cleansing and genocide and supremacy is reflected in this Zionist story. Obviously, that's the case, and it's one of the reasons that the United States has been so unable to do anything to overcome this illegal system, which it supports and subsidizes. The Israel lobby, the largely Jewish organizations, and also some Christian evangelical organizations that tie politicians' hands, they play an important role in this. But I think in terms of the ideology, it's impossible not to look at Zionism and see some echoes of white supremacist ideology in the United States. And so it's one of the worst aspects of what has happened in Israel and Palestine is the degree to which the United States has been dragged into this, and willingly, I suppose, but also dragged into it, and has become the overseer of this process. And it's damaged the American, I think American reputation overseas has been damaged by a lot of things. But, you know, when Barack Obama in his greatest moment of bravery abstained on a resolution condemning settlements in 2016, exactly 4 years ago, he abstained, and the other 14 members of the Security Council passed that resolution. They called it a flagrant violation of international law. So other countries, including China and Russia and Egypt, and I think Venezuela was involved, in Poland, I think. But anyway, the members of the Security Council had no problem seeing this as a flagrant violation of international law. And the United States has been become the overseer of this colonization process. And I want to talk a little about, because Santewa showed us the degree to which radical organizations in the United States have adopted the Palestinian cause, and the extent to which they have fought this colonization process. And I think for someone who's not really rooted in that tradition, I am not. I come out of a journalistic, more kind of liberal liberal tradition, but I've become more radicalized through this process. One of the things I've come to recognize is that it was radicals in the United States who had a very clear understanding of the morality of this question since the 60s. And much as it was, you know, a lot of radicals in the abolition movement in the 1850s and 1840s in the North that provided solidarity to uprisings by enslaved persons and other forms of resistance against the slavery, the order of slavery. And again, the order of slavery was based on a very supremacist ideology, and it also had developed these sort of geographical demands of expanding. It was so embattled that it just had to keep expanding and expanding and militarizing. And that's part of the reason the Civil War happened, is because it was spreading its reign. And that's what's happening with Zionism in Israel. It's an embattled ideology. It's increasingly being delegitimized internationally. So it has to double down and extend its reign over persecuted second-class, third-class people in Palestine. And I find it remarkable that Asante referred to what happened when Ethel Minor and SNCC came out against, I forget the exact terms on which they condemn Zionism, but it was a crossroads for SNCC. It was and I haven't researched this in depth, but it's a legend on the left that when SNCC had been supported by many liberal Jews, left-wing Jews in the North in order to liberate the South or Jim Crow, and it took this obvious stance, to my way of thinking, which was our struggle is not different from the Palestinian struggle. And the roof caved in for SNCC. I know they survived that, but it created a divide between sort of Jewish friends or some Jewish friends, not the radical Jewish friends. They were cool with it, but some of the backers of SNCC. And it was a real crisis. And one of the things that has been dispiriting and inspiring too about Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black lives embracing the Palestinian cause, is they are subject to the exact same pressures now. And they came out and they called it apartheid and genocide in their 2016 platform. And they've called for, I believe they've endorsed BDS. And now they're under huge pressure from their mostly Jewish, liberal Jewish brethren saying, oh, we're down for it on the American front in terms of fighting racism here, but let's not call that apartheid. So that's another big echo here. I'll just conclude. I think I see 8 o'clock looming, and I think we want to let other people who are here have something to say. I just feel that I'm an optimist, and I see there's real progress in this struggle, and partly it's because of the growing international solidarity. It's because of a boycott call, very similar to boycott calls that we've had in the United States over racist incidents, racist structures, racist policies, and that boycott call has been extremely effective, to my way of thinking. And it's one that has gained a lot of international acceptance and incredible resistance from the power structure in the United States, which is a really good sign, including from the guy who I began my remarks by speaking of, Andrew Cuomo, who has said the boycott movement is is anti-Semitic and all this other stuff. So I'm very optimistic because there is such a broad-based movement that is, I think radicals get the credit on this, but that is increasingly bringing in a broad coalition, including some moderate elements on the left. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing what other people have to say.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you. How many times can you unmute yourself? All right, I did it 3 times. Okay, so we have questions. And we have questions from our participants. This is a question for everybody. It's a kind of a recent development. We've got Biden now as president, and Betsy in Baltimore asks, what demandments do we have for Joe Biden? And it's not, of course, just Joe, but it's this administration. What are we going to go for? What are we going to demand now around white supremacy and the militarization of the police? Asantwa, I see your hand. Asantwa, can you unmute yourself? Can you unmute yourself?
There we go.
You're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
I would just say, do a Google search of Joe Biden and who I call Kamala Harris regarding Zionism and the Palestinians. They both admit to being Zionists in so many words.
Yeah.
So I have no faith in this oncoming administration of Biden and Harris. I have no confidence in them whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I have nothing but contempt for them. They both support cops. they both support the militarization of police. Biden himself said he's not in favor of defunding the police. Here comes Barack Obama out of wherever saying, oh, you're going to push people away with the phrase defunding. They are only there to defend this capitalist system. And they obviously are afraid if this momentum continues that we had this summer with hundreds, if not thousands of young people in the streets protesting police terrorism, multi-generational, multiracial, multi-gender, but Black led, they fear that. This country got shook. As old as I am, I don't remember, and I observed a lot of protests on TV back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s as I was coming of age politically. I don't ever remember seeing a police building being set on fire. It's a new day, right? So I think that's one thing. But if we look at the political history of Biden in terms of mass incarceration, his advocating for war against Iraq, etc., the political history of Kamala Harris as a prosecutor, where she never brought a police officer, never pressed charges against a police officer for violence or misconduct, not once. These are the kind of things we need to do for our political education so we can share that with other people. So I have no confidence in them whatsoever.
And the next question, and this is for everybody. Thank you, Asantwa. The next question that just came up is, how can we put pressure then on Biden and Harris? And I know your, political education is good. Let's talk about their past, but what kinds of strategies do our other panelists have for, where are the pressure points now in terms of national politics? We've been working very definitely locally on this crisis in capitalism as it relates to gentrification, as it relates to stop and frisk, as it relates to incredible income inequality and just slave wages that people are earning locally. So many people are barely hanging on. But what should be, as we organize, what should be the demands and the focus aside from facing challenging militarization of the police? Anybody? Anne, do you have any ideas about what should be our demands now going forward? Or Phil? Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. Are you trying to unmute yourself?
No,
Anne?
Marjorie, I just felt that that's not a question that I should field. I'd be over, there are a lot of organizers here who are far more experienced than me in those areas.
Okay, let me go to some of the other questions. When we organized this event, we were looking at white supremacists' role. This was before the election, actually, and as we've seen, organized Trumpists are showing up with their weapons. Have you seen this, Asantwa, in the local struggles that you've been involved in? And have you seen cooperation between the police and the white supremacists, the armed white supremacists? Yes.
Yes. Back a few months ago, when we had the protest here in solidarity with George Floyd in the area called Fishtown, there was a Black Lives Matter protest in the middle of Girard Avenue, a major street in that part of town. Some local young white men came out, walked to Girard Avenue from throughout Fishtown, and were carrying golf clubs, baseball bats, and hammers. And they attacked some people in the crowd. And that too was caught on video. And the police were standing around and they did nothing. In South Philadelphia, some folks, again, young white men, took it upon themselves to defend Target and Walmart, right? Now, regarding South Philadelphia, at that point, there had not been any, what I call unauthorized taking at that time, but I guess they wanted to preempt that. But where does that sense of entitlement, that kind of arrogance come from, that you think it's up to you to protect Target and Walmart especially, given their labor practices, right? These young white men who were in Fishtown area, one of them who was caught on video and was arrested, had a prior history of starting fights. So I think he caught some serious charges, but that tends to be a regular occurrence. And I think it's always been there, but certainly the selection of Trump as president brought more of that to the fore.
Mhm, mhm. Does any other panelist want to speak to the presence of white supremacists in connection with the cops? Anne, are you unmuting yourself? Yeah. Can someone unmute Anne, please? Okay, you're
Think am I unmuted?
yes.
Okay. There is a group of people that I believe are from the Mid-Hudson area. They call themselves the Concerned Citizens. And they are very pro-cop. They have not been, they don't come out and counter-protest. They are doing petitions. They come to the last budget meeting. It was overwhelmingly responses from these concerned citizens. And the things that they were saying was like, what city are you talking about? They were talking about bullets flying over Broadway in broad daylight. And, they were supporting the police budget. So far, they haven't been doing anything more than just petitioning. One did say after we had a rally outside of the mayor's house, one person said that they should go to the raggedy blank blank houses where the marches come from and find out where they live at and call DSS and call the IRS and, all this kind of underhanded kind of tactics that they were talking about. But that's about it. I do know that I didn't witness it, but there was some conflict. I believe it was in Pleasantville. Is anybody familiar with that? I don't know the details. But in Pleasantville, a Black woman was injured, her and her daughter. There was a counter protest that got pretty violent.
Yeah, they're out there for sure. Thank you. Thank you. Another question. I want to, I'm getting this from the chat. Jamu Baraka says to everyone, a clear demand to stop the settlements must be advanced, of course. Howard Horowitz writes, I think it's very relevant that close to or over 70% of Jewish voters voted for Obama when he was under attack by AIPAC and for Biden I don't see where this is a question. I'm sorry, folks. All right, I'm going to go to some of our prepared questions, one or two of them. In the resistance, I want to ask this question to Asantwa and Anne. In the resistance now in the Black Lives Matter movement, what role do you see for white people to play?
You want to go first, Anne?
Anne, are you unmuting yourself? Good.
Yeah, I did it. I did it this time.
Good.
White people need to be up front. they need to go back and tell their other friends and their families what's going on. On another level, maybe they can hire somebody. Maybe they can give somebody, you know, rent somebody an apartment. Join a group. Join a group, but become active. Definitely become active. And like at the marches, you know, we have marshals who are white that are sort of like a shield during the marches. That's one thing that white people do. A lot of the cop watchers are white because there might be a conflict with the black cop watchers with cops. Have an issue. It was, you know, a lot of sarcasm and stuff, but I didn't have an issue when I did the cop watch. But I think that white people should step in where black people can't go because of their color.
Okay, thank you. Santua.
Yeah, I want to echo that racism and white supremacy is a political problem. Therefore, it requires a political solution. I would ask that all of our white brothers and sisters, our white comrades, join an organization. Join an organization. Now, as Ann just alluded to, depending on what kind of event that you're participating in, whatever privilege that may exist, and privilege does not, it's not just race or white privilege, there's all kinds of privileges, right? Use that privilege strategically in an organization to get a desired result. So in the case that Ann just mentioned, that's a good one. Here in Philadelphia, when we've had our large marches, white people on bicycles get at intersections because we know there's been a problem of motorists charging through crowds, right? And everybody has their camera out. That's one thing. I think what's inspiring to me is the original Rainbow Coalition, before Reverend Jesse Jackson took it over. The original Rainbow Coalition was an organization of young working class whites in Chicago that formed this grassroots radical organization. And that original Rainbow Coalition was the Young Patriots organization, the Black Panther Party, and the Young Lords. Look all of that up, the original Rainbow Coalition, and they each had their separate, distinct organizations, while at the same time, they formed this coalition. And the only reason why they didn't last but for a few years was due to the Democratic Party in Chicago and the dating machine and the harassment they got from the police. Every time we make those type of efforts, it's always the government, the police, the FBI, those kind of forces that try to disrupt it. But we know it can work because every time we try to make it work, you know, we be doing good for a while, but then here comes the police. And I think also too, there's a word of caution regarding the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is not the friend or savior of our movement. The Democratic Party is where our movements go to die. They get siphoned off into the NGO foundation complex, the nonprofit industrial complex, etc. So for all of our white comrades, join an organization. I must also say here that as a movement, we will never, and we unapologetically will not tolerate any type of Islamophobia or anti-Jewish bigotry. At the same time, we are unapologetically against Zionism and all of its theological and political manifestations.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than hearing a Black Christian talk about Israel, right? If you look at the document that Fred is going to send you, there's a warning about Reverend Dumasani Washington and Chloe Valdry, two Black Christians, very prominent and very Zionist. And the worst problem with Zionism comes from some Christian folks I know. So if you can imagine these Black Christians going around, you know, being Zionists, Chloe Valdry has now formed her own consulting firm called Theory of Engagement, Theory of Enchantment. And she's going to teach you or your company or your nonprofit how to be compassionate and filled with love, again, to be anti-racist. When just 6-7 years ago, she was doing YouTube videos calling Palestinians violent and terrorists, and they deserve what they get. So it's not a new hustle. So let's be aware of all those kind of things as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Asantwa. I have another question that might go to you, Asantwa, and it is that the military in the United States is very good at offering various incentives. It's an economic draft, we like to say, and especially young Black and Brown people go into the military, men and women, because they think they're going to get certain benefits that they wouldn't have otherwise, like tuition, free education, and so forth. Could you speak to how you counter that type of thing most effectively?
It's very easy. Show them all the statistics of homeless veterans. Show them all the statistics of veterans who have post-traumatic stress disorder and they're not being properly treated. Show them all the veterans who are seeking or have been through some type of mental health treatment program. This is the part we don't show our young people. And I think for many of our organizations that are out here, they need to be creating programs and things for our young people. We got all these mega churches where the preacher has a jet plane. But why doesn't that church give their millions, whatever money they raise, and put it into programs for young people? We need to tell our young people the truth about the military. We need to tell them about the bombings of the drone bombings in Muslim countries, the bombing of Yemen, all the sexual abuse, the sexual harassment and rapes in the US military that goes on not just against women. We need to tell them the whole truth and then put political pressure on politicians and other folks to create opportunities for our young people. For these politicians here in Philadelphia especially, they need to be able to tell us, why are they in bed with developers in their own district? Why are there so many vacant city-owned houses in Philadelphia that could provide housing for homeless people?
Yeah.
For politicians in Philadelphia, we need to find out how many of them got a check from the Fraternal Order of Police. This is where we must do our homework.
Okay. I have one more question that I'm going to ask to all of the panelists, and there are two parts to it. We've been talking about white supremacy, and the general question is, how does the law support white supremacy, and how does the law ignore white supremacy? And then Phil, for you, essentially the question is, what are the elements of privilege asserted by Israeli settlers, and how does the law support them? Jewish privilege, essentially. It's an aspect of white supremacy, as you mentioned before. So maybe we can go first with the US-based struggles of how does the law in the United States support white supremacy or ignore white supremacy? And we can talk about the criminal justice system, as an example, but I think it applies in many situations. Asantwa, do you want to start, or Anne, do you want to start?
I'll let them start.
Or Phil, do you want to start? Okay, Asantwa, you're the only person who's unmuted right now, so why don't you start?
Okay, so the question is in terms of how the laws are written?
Well, yeah, how does it support or ignore white supremacy? It does both in certain ways, right?
Well, it's like you have a law that's on the books, but is it enforced? If it's not enforced, why isn't it enforced? Right? We have a problem here in Philadelphia, stop and frisk. Our current mayor, Mayor Kinney, ran on a platform of stopping stop and frisk. Now, he hasn't done it yet. He hasn't really put out, he hasn't put in a lot of work on that. Now, they did some kind of little something where it's supposed to have went down some. But again, it's the question of what laws are enforced and why. What laws are not enforced and why? When who benefits?
Yeah.
So when I say, you know, we must be organized, I'm saying that in the broad sense, but in terms of these issues, it means we would have to become the experts on certain issues to organize ourselves with others to hold people accountable and at the very least embarrass them on camera. So I would say that for one thing, changing laws may be another tactic to use, but that presupposes there are people who you may want to elect to change those laws. Because sometimes we have politicians who appear to be progressive and want to do the right thing, and then once they get in office, they forget about the people who worked on that campaign and voted for them, etc. So how do we organize ourselves to really be more politically savvy and to be able to watch out for that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anne, do you have something to add to this in terms of the criminal justice system in Kingston?
Yeah, the bail is a white supremacist tactic. It breaks up families because the breadwinner might be in jail for a couple of days over not being able to pay a fine. Then it has that domino effect if the breadwinner or not, in this case, everybody's working, but if you need all the money, so if one person is gone, that's going to affect the whole household. But the whole concept of giving somebody bail, especially for such minor offenses, anything other than a violent crime, is a racist tactic.
Yeah,
It really is.
it is. So, and Phil, do you want to talk about that question in terms of privilege in among the settlers?
Well, I wanted to bring that home. I want to say that to address a lot of the issues that have been raised in that connection, there are many laws in our country that support the Zionist system over there. And those include these anti-BDS laws. So I'm talking to a group of people here. Everyone on this call, participant, audience, whoever, we're all participants, has a long history. They know, you all know about struggle. And this is just, we're involved in a struggle here. And the laws that have to be overturned, that should be the focus of attention in our country, are these anti-BDS laws, including the executive order that Cuomo signed that makes it, that bars the state from giving money to an organization that endorses boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. A basic free speech right. Is essentially illegal, or it has real legal consequences in the state of New York and in 27 other states. And so there's a lot of organizing around that in this country now. And in a larger sense, I think that, you know, as Howard pointed out earlier, 70% of American Jews have backed Obama even when Netanyahu was taking him down, going after him. And they opposed they counter AIPAC. This is a very passive Jewish population, I think, by and large, those 70%. I don't give them a lot of credit. I give Jewish Voice for Peace credit. I give Howard credit. I give a lot of my friends in the radical Jewish and left-wing Jewish community credit for organizing here. But I think what is critical in the consciousness raising that's going on about these issues is that we have to start making anti-Palestinian racism as verboten as other forms of racism, because that's what Zionism entails. It entails anti-Palestinian racism. There's no two ways about that. And what you find is that, yes, you start advocating for Palestinian human rights, and within a matter of minutes, someone's going to say, aren't you being anti-Semitic? That's this charge that is falsely used against people who advocate for Palestinian human rights. And the counter to that, one of the counters to that is that we believe that there should not be anti-Palestinian racism in this country. And, I believe it was Anne referred to Islamophobia and how important it is in our movements not to allow Islamophobia or anti-Semitism. Well, darn it, we've also got to be opposed to anti-Palestinian racism. It's vicious, it's dehumanizing, has horrifying consequences for millions of people who are stripped of their rights and have no audience in the United States because of that. And so there's a lot of organizing that has to be done, and it can be done in a lot of different venues, both legal and letters to the editor and town meetings and placards on the side of the road.
Good. Okay. And Asantua, yes.
Yeah, I just want to add that we often, in the course of doing our Palestine solidarity work, we're called anti-Semitic. But what I use to push back on those folks, can you tell me who are and are not Semitic people? I came of age in a time when Jewish comrades who were anti-imperialists had to struggle among themselves to not only be anti-imperialist, but also anti-Zionist, again, in all of its theological and political manifestations. Zionism is not just political, it's also theological in terms of how we misinterpret the scriptures, right? So what we need to do as part of our political education is go to our Jewish comrades who have written about who are and are not Semitic people. And there's lots of them. There's lots of them. In the piece that I sent to Fred to send out to everyone later on, there's a couple of articles. One is that Semitic is a language group, not a race or ethnic group, written in Counterpunch back in 2003. Another article, it's time to recognize the term anti-Semitism is a misnomer. There are hundreds, if not thousands of articles. We need to find them. And this is one of the weaknesses of us on the left. We need to be able to push back on folks when they come at us with that. Because as BDS continues to grow, and every time you want to support BDS, because it violates Palestinians' rights, they call us anti-Semitic, but I push them back. And that's what I used to push them back with. Then they get silent and they go off somewhere else. Leave me alone.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, we're at 8:29, and I think we're going to have to close this down. I want to thank the 46 participants who have stayed with us through this, I thought, fantastic panel event. The speakers could not have been more authentic, more passionate, more knowledgeable, more having had more lived experience in the struggles in which they lead. And I mean, Phil, you're obviously somebody who informs us as a journalist through Mondo Weiss about what is happening. And it's such an incredibly valuable asset.
Thank you.
Asantua and Anne, both of you have been absolutely wonderful. You've enlightened us, you've inspired us, and I just really thank you. Our organizers, thank you very, very much for this event. So
just thank you for all these work all over these years, informing us about so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. And so we're recording this. We'll send it out if people want to see it again. And we hope that you'll continue to support the efforts of the people here, the struggle locally, the struggle in Philadelphia, the National Poor People's Campaign, which Asantua is involved with. And yes?
Can I say something about that real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm with the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign and Poor People's Army.
Okay.
The distinction between us and the Poor People's Campaign of Reverend William Barber. With all due respect to him and his campaign, we of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, Poor People's Army, we believe that poor and working class people should be politically independent and not beholden to the Democratic Party, foundations, or the nonprofit industrial complex. We want to be free. We want to be free from the Democratic Party. And this is the political path we have chosen.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And I want to learn more. So thank you again to all
you.
of our participants and our panelists for this event. And we're going to say goodbye.
Good night.
Free,
Thank you,
free
everybody.
Palestine.
Wonderful.
That's
Free,
right.
free Palestine. Okay.